Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and at long last, way too overdue, but we are about to make this video about, and just sort of a kind of in-depth guide as to how to get into PvP. This, I will say right now, just right out the gate, this is not going to be a video teaching you how to PvP, because a PvP match can go like an infinite number of ways, and I think that it's best to sort of learn for yourself, but I will go over some of the basic things that each school does, and just basic things that y'all should know about, so that way y'all can sort of try and do them on your own, and see what works, see what doesn't, and evolve with the meta. That is the best way to sort of gain valuable experience in the arena. So, first things first, you're going to want a specific gear set, and it depends on your school, but a very important part of this is meeting your school's stat caps. And at the moment, if you're just coming for PvE, fresh off, just, you know, not really sure what's going on yet, then y'all will know about the damage cap being 235, but in PvP, damage caps are different. And there's a bunch of stat caps as well. So, on the life school, for example, the damage cap is 179. I want to say, or no, it's 180. I've got the screenshot pulled up for all of your primary school damage caps, and I will be putting that in the video. It should be on screen right now. I'm just looking over my own character screen, so there is that. But yeah, life, for example, has 180% for the damage cap. I am one shy of that with my gear setup. The resist cap is 74 for life, which I'm also one shy of. The accuracy cap is 56%, but you don't need to worry about that. I promise you don't need that much accuracy. And then the outgoing cap, which does actually matter for life wizards, is 112. I have 82. Could reasonably get 84 if I got a better pin, but oh well. I'm not trying to farm like that. But yeah, those are the primary school stat caps for every school, and the, I guess, level 150 and 160 stuff is in there just if you're doing like challenge mode or raids, depending on what you're doing. But you get the idea. You want to meet those stat caps as best as you can, and you also want to ensure that you have enough accuracy to not base fizzle. Sometimes, you know, the best gear setup, you can't avoid that. But it is what it is. You want to be sure you don't fizzle. You want to be sure you can, like, crit reliably. Your block multiplier should also be up. Your pierce should be as close to the cap as possible. For life, that is 51%, and I have that. And then you also want to make sure you have 100% pip chance, just so that way you never pip fail. I have 99 on the life, and then I think this is the only school where the gear setup that I have does not give you 100%. So, just something to keep in mind. But yeah. Pip conversion is also kind of useful depending on school, and then shad rating is the most important stat of all. You need to be sure you have a lot of shad rating. You don't want to be running in with like 2-piece shad, because you will get out-shadded. And with the way, I'm going to go over a specific spell later on in this video, and y'all are going to see it, and y'all are going to understand why you need shadow pip rating, because it's very, very important. So anyway, that is just a little bit about the stat caps, but next up you want to look into the gear, and there are a bunch of different options for the life school, and as well as the storm school. Maybe I should just like put out like a gear guide for PvP just on every school, and that'll probably be something that I do later this week. That's just it's just for now. I'm going over general stuff. So there's a few options. You can either use the Jabalba hats, or the Faeriequeens hats are the same as the Jabalba hats, with like a different item card, I want to say. And then there's also the Wastelander hats, which give up crit block in favor of like pip chance, I guess, which is where the Xibalba hat lacks. So it really all depends. If you do want to know the best gear setup, and I haven't made the video yet about, like what's the best for each school, then just leave a comment and I will tell you what I run for that school, because it does meet the stat caps as best as I can do it. So there's that. For the robes, there's definitely some options, some people use the Dreamstalker robe, and then others use the Hunhao robe. And then there's also, some schools will use the robes from the Forbidden Library Horde Pack, which don't actually give any Shadow Pip rating, but, okay, I was not lucky enough to just pull one straight out the gate, but yeah, you get the general gist of things. The library robe, and apparently that would put me over the jewel limit. I don't even know what is taking all of the space up. But yeah, you get the general gist. There's a bunch of different options for gear in this game, and I would absolutely recommend just, making sure that you can hit all your stat caps to the best of your ability, and just be sure you're doing that, because those stat caps and knowing them, that is your lifeline. You need to be sure that you can do that and understand just how high your stats can really go. So yeah, I will give this pack one more shot because I got this as an extra credit reward. Can I get... No, not even in the slightest. Okay, well, I'm done tempting fate for the time being, but yeah, there's a bunch of robe options. It really depends on what you want to be running. Hunhao and Stalker, in my opinion, are the best, but you can run the Plot Armor robe from the Forbidden Library pack and Gauntlet if you decide you want to give up like just a little bit of shad rating for something else, which some people do. Running 3-piece shad isn't too insanely terrible compared to 4-piece, but you really just don't want to go below 3-piece. That's kind of the main kicker there. But yeah, you'll get some extra stats if you use the plot robe, just you're giving up shads. But anyway, for the boots, there's options here, You can use the Xibalba boots, which many schools do, but if you are a school that uses a shield pin, you will want either the Dreamstalker boots or the Burrower boots from the Burrower's Horde Pack, or General Lightbane in the Last Wood. That's a gold key boss that you can farm for the Burrower gear. It kind of just depends on how your stat caps are looking. Like if you need extra accuracy, for example, and on this character I do, because without it I would be able to fizzle shads and gambits and lore spells, and on life you use a lot of lore spells. I'll go into that in a bit, but yeah, it really depends on where your stat caps are at. Just use what you feel is right. And then for the wands, at the moment, there's not really a whole lot of wiggle room here. It's either the Hunhao wand for level 170, if you are running pip conversion, because that's kind of like your only option, because the Xibalba wand, which is Reaver equivalent, but it gives shads instead of pip conversion, the Xibalba wands will not give that pip conversion, as I just mentioned, in favor of shads. And both of these wands give shads, and that's something very, very important, because the clothes and the wand are where you get your shad rating from. So that is something to keep in mind, absolutely. So yeah, Xibalba wand if you are not running pip conversion, Hunhao if you are. There's also the level 160 Xibalba wands. Some schools can get away with running this. The square socket allows you to socket a lot more health compared to the tier socket on the 170s, but only do this if like you don't need accuracy or like a little bit of extra damage, that type of deal. There's drawbacks to using it, but there's also the added benefit of having a little bit more health, which can save you in some scenarios. For the Athame, this can also depend. Usually I recommend the Reaver Athame or the Xibalba Athame if you are Life Restore running outgoing. But yeah, the main thing is you want to be able to have that square for that extra health. That's very important. And of course, the two Pierce Jewels on this, so very important. There is also, I don't actually have it on this character, but I do actually have some that are similar. The the Imperial Court Knives, or like the Gold Key Boss Athames from Takanobu the Masterless or Lambent Fire, those Athames are good, but they give a triangle socket. So if you need to make up some stats that you can get with a triangle, being accuracy or pip chance, then you can use that, but it will come at the cost of some health. So you're sort of picking and choosing. But yeah, you will actually get some extra pip chance if you use that Athame though, so that is another thing to keep in mind. For the amulet, this one also sort of depends. Most use the Hunhao amulets or the library amulets, which you will see. Hopefully you will see. Can I just like pull one? Okay, so I just got the fire plot robe. you could see what's going on here, but yeah, the amulets that you can get from the Forbidden Library Horde Pack as well. Okay, so I got two just now, and I already have one of these. Tough, but you get the idea. This will give a lot of health, a lot of resist. It'll give you some pip conversion, some crit block, but it will also give you a square socket. And this also kind of depends if you are, you know, a school that runs like 5 circle jewels, then you will want the Hunhao amulet. But if you are a school that runs like 4 and you need some extra stats with the square, some more health, whatever you want to do, as well as the brace, because defensive schools do run more braces, but in that scenario you would want this amulet, the archival amples. So for fire, for example, you probably would not want to run this, but for ice you absolutely would. So just something to keep in mind. So I'll gamble one more time just to see what I get, and nothing. How about it? But so that is the amulet. Hunhao or the Faeriequeens amulets are relatively similar. You can just use those. Those are the two options that you want there. And then for the rings, these are usually going to be the Skyfarer rings, and these come from the Skyfarer's Horde Pack or the Meowiarty rematch, which you can do for free. Although I guess free is sort of using it loosely. It comes at the cost of your sanity. But yeah, I mean, the Skyfarer rings, they just give a lot of pip chance. Like, most of these setups will get you like just under 100, but this is where that's really made up, the Skyfarer rings. So something to absolutely keep in mind as you go along. So Skyfarer rings, they also give some outgoing, I guess, no, that's depending on school. Some schools will get off-school damage, others will get outgoing. Life and Storm get outgoing. This is really important for Life and Storm, because those two schools heal. But yeah, for the pets, this really depends. You'll see people run like a double Mighty Breaker, which is what this pet is. And then you'll also see people run like Sharp Shot in case they need extra accuracy. That's what I do on my ice. But it really all comes down to those stat caps. It's like, if you need to be sure that you hit the stat caps and be sure that you don't fizzle, then you might want Sharp Shot on the pet, that sort of thing. You'll have to give and take, like give up stats here and there, but ultimately the pet is the most customizable piece of gear that you can have. This is really where you can sort of figure out what works toward the end. So there's that. For this unicorn keeps pulling me back. I think that's kind of crazy. But the mounts, those are going to matter a bunch as well, because there are some mounts that give a slight stat boost. The Clockwork Courser is a favorite. This and the Vulpine Avenger both give 2 Pierce, and this will get you to, this at least pulls me up to my Pierce cap on most of my schools. So that's very important. Pierce is something that you absolutely need to have at the cap, just because of how resist works. So Clockwork Courser, very, very important. For the decks, this one kind of comes down to it. Most will use the Imperial Court decks because they give a 5th copy of Dark Surge, which is a very important spell. And they also give some decent stats as well. Some schools can afford to use the Hunhao deck if they're not running pip conversion. It'll get you some extra health, and I guess like an extra copy of a lore spell. But yeah, These are good. These are really the two options that you have. Like there's square socket decks, but it's not like the greatest idea. I would run these before the Imperial Court decks dropped, but yeah, it's like these. Okay, so these and the Athames that I was mentioning earlier, that drop from Gold Key bosses. These Imperial Court decks, these will drop from Takanobu the Masterless, and then they have equivalents that drop from Lambent Fire. So there is that to think about, and then yeah, so that took a long time to talk about. Actually, I'm 15 minutes into this video, and I just finished talking about gear. Interesting, because I still have a lot. But there's also a bunch of spell weaving combos that you can do in Selenopolis, and ultimately, it's going to come down to weaving fire or storm for many. I guess Life can technically get away with weaving ice or death. I know that Life's weaving death has become kind of a big thing lately because it's very good with like mitigation. Death weaving is, so it's really up to you what you want to do. But on fire, I weave storm. On ice, I weave storm. On storm, I weave fire. On myth, I weave fire at the moment, but storm is probably better just for countering purposes. And then on my life, I'm currently weaving fire, but I may switch over to death. And then on my death, I weave fire. And then on my balance, I actually don't weave anything on my balance right now. Don't even worry about it. But I would be weaving either storm or death on my balance. So storm is sort of just like a rule of thumb for a lot of schools. But death can actually really make good use of fire weave. So that is another thing to keep in mind. One more thing that I did want to go over that I actually didn't have in my script is spellaments. You're going to need these. Tier 2 is usually enough to be, I guess, like, competent necessarily, but it can help a lot to have the max tier. Like, it's marginally more damage, it's 40 more base damage, but, like, that does add up, and, like, multipliers really matter. So then, of course, you got things like Goat Monk for a Life Wizard. This is a staple. But then you have other spells like, Burrowing Bane. This is a very strong card, but it's not like the end of the world if you have tier 2 as opposed to tier 5. And then you have your like Arc 1 and 2s. Those can be good, but ultimately I wouldn't sweat it too much. Tier 2 usually is fine enough. That's just how it goes with that. And yeah, just something to keep in mind there. So that's spellaments. They are important, but it's not like the end of the world, like I said. So if you don't have like max tier, so wouldn't worry about it too much. Just as long as you can use your cards. So now it's time, like 17-ish minutes into the video, to talk about deck building. And with deck building, Major, one of the like an experienced PvPer, he has coined the term the 1811 rule, which is just the general idea of packing 18 unique cards in your main deck. I haven't actually counted here, but it's following the general, I guess, like idea, because it's like you want to have copies of the cards that you do use, but you also don't want to like overload your deck with like nonsense cards. Like if I wanted to pack set shields, then like to storm, for example, I'd have to fit this in here somewhere. And in doing so, like say for example, I go against a death and I start pulling these, then I'm not going to use those against a death, obviously. So yeah, so I've got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 unique cards in my main deck, not counting the wands down here and all this other stuff. So it's a bit shy of 18, but life does not really deviate too much. Some other schools might have maybe 1 or 2 more than 18, but just this general idea of only packing what you really need and what you really go for with your setup, because you, like, for example, you probably don't need, like, let's say Centaur or Earthwalker in main if you have them inside. And I am actually probably in a power short. Yeah, okay, so the side deck, 11 cards, but on the life I have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 actually, so closer there. But it's the same general gist. You want to be sure that you are actually pulling your cards as best as you can. So that is sort of the main thing. And then every school sort of has something that they tend to go for. But yeah, you can sort of tell. Maybe like if you just watch my PvP videos, I usually show off the deck in the little intro that I do. So if you want to copy the decks that I usually copy them from Cast PvP, a friend of mine who is one of the top ranked players at the moment. Streams occasionally, so a little plug. But I use his decks and tweak them a little bit just so that they fit my playstyle a little bit more. But ultimately, it is up to you what you want to do with your decks. So just making sure that you cycle is of the utmost importance. And cycling is another important thing. If you are going for like a specific strat, like say for example, you want to set up a Verdurous Djinn, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to cycle your main deck to do this, because you can get 2 Burrowing Banes on for, you know, a combined total of 10 pips, and then you can send a Verdurous Djinn if your opponent does not counter them. So if you want to go for that, if you want to set that up, then it depends on how many pips you have at that point. So if you don't have a lot of pips, you may want to use a Dark Surge with one of your Shads to give yourself 2 power pips or 4 pips. So let's say you're at 6 pips and you wanted to pull off a Verdurous Djinn combo. You go ahead and you use this, and then now you are at 12 pips. So at that point, you could Burrowing Bane twice, right? So Burrowing Bane once gets you to 9 pips. Burrowing Bane a second time will get you to 6, and then you would, I don't know, maybe Brace or something, or Stabilize, for example, or you would Attenuate to sort of boost the damage. You would want to be pulling for this Verdurous Djinn, and you would be discarding cards that you don't need, is basically where I'm going with this. So it's like if you had, like if you're trying to run this against like a fire, for example, you might not want Glacial Fortress because they don't use weaknesses. So if you pull these, you might want to get rid of them, but don't click draw into your side deck unless like your opponent is doing something that you need to dig into side deck for. Because, you know, if you're trying to set this up and you are digging in here for something, then you may not pull either, you know, the second Burrowing Bane or even the Djinn. So just being sure that you have the cards that you need is very, very important. That's why I pack 6 Burrowing Banes and only 2 Djinns. I usually don't go for this, just because this can be countered, and of course using 2 is a bright red flag that you're going for this, so try not to telegraph it too much, but you know, it's like some schools take English, but some schools take chip strategies, and cards like Burrowing Bane are good for that, but you can set something up. It's just you need to pull it. So if you are discarding your Luminous Weavers, your Goat Monks, your Sanctuaries, your Tuarets, in an attempt to look for these, then there's that too. If you are trying to go on the defense, you might throw out a Stabilize, or if you need a shield, for example, you could discard some of the cards that you're not using on that turn. Like if you only have 1 Shad, you're probably not going to use a Hungry Caterpillar, you can go ahead and get rid of that, and you can pull for one of the tower shields that you have in your side deck. So that's sort of how you slow that down, and just sort of play how you do. And I'm using the Life School just sort of as an example here, but every school sort of does that, depending on just sort of how your playstyle fits with how you've built your deck. So there's that. Bubble Wars, maybe these will get banned soon. I kind of hope that they do, because this is a whole nother element of deck RNG that I detest, because sometimes it's like I've talked all this about, you know, like cycling through your deck, but like if your opponent has bubble control, like say for example you're going against a myth and they have a Time of Legend out, you want to replace that with a Circle of Thorns, and then all you're getting is like you discard your whole hand, and then your next hand is like 2 of these, 1 of these, 1 of these, and like 1 of these when you don't have a Shad. Like bruh, it's like you're looking for this, not these. So yeah, but then there's also times where you'll want to keep one of these because you want to be sure that you have it, you save the card. Sort of like if you pull one of these, that's sort of your green light to try and go for this, like 2 Burrowing Banes into this. and combo that as you will, but it really depends on how your deck RNG is going through the match. So I just talked a lot of words, and this video is starting to get very long, but I'm trying to simplify it a little bit. I know it's probably very complicated, but just what you are trying to go for is what you should be pulling for. And, you know, like if you need to counter shields because that Myth Wizard is trying to go for a Djinn, then you can do this and switch your pips to fire in the middle of the match to try and go for that, like if you're using fire, for example. So it's a lot of moving parts, and like I said before, PvP matches can go any number of ways, so yeah, sometimes you'll need these, and it really also depends on the matchup. Like if you're going against a death, you probably won't need Toirettes, because why would you need to clear overtimes if you're going against a school that doesn't use overtimes, you know, and that sort of thing. And it's like these, you'll probably do away with these against Storm, or maybe even other Life Wizards, I guess, depending, but yeah, it's like you need to know what you counter and what counters you, and that sort of brings me to my next point. The Rambo Wheel is something that you've probably heard of before at this point, but basically, the Rambo Wheel, I'll throw it on screen. It's this is who counters what, and that sort of, you see, it's like if you have an arrow pointing to your school, that means those schools counter you, but if you have an arrow pointing from your school towards another, that is a school that you counter. So Life, for example, counters Myth directly, and Fire sort of indirectly. They're just sort of both on the arrow. So those, like Fire and Myth, are the two matchups that Life is meant to be the strongest in. And I will say that in practice, sometimes these matchups don't really line up. Life also can beat Death rather reliably, depending on what the Death is going for. And there's also matchups like Ice versus Storm, which are very close, rather than it being a complete wash for the Ice. So I also make matchup tier lists relatively often. My last one was about a month ago, and in those I sort of go over like what matchups are really like favorable depending on where you look. So there's that, but yeah, you know, if you want to see more of that, stay tuned. I'll probably be doing another relatively soon. So yeah, just knowing what matchups you're good in, and also just knowing what counters you. It's like I was saying earlier with Burrowing Bane, this creates 2 damage overtimes on the target, which is why, you know, if you get at least 3 damage overtimes on the target, Verdurous Djinn can do some more damage. But if you're going against somebody who's getting a lot of Storm pips, for example, you may not want to use this. You might throw it out just to give them something to react to. But if you're going against a Storm Wizard, for example, you may not want to use this because if you do this, you might get, like, I don't know, 500 damage on the first tick, but they'll send a Stormzilla back at you, do some damage, and get 245 blades out of it, clearing your overtimes in the process. So that's sort of what all of the Path Bs kind of do. It's like if you were to use it against like another Life Wizard, for example, like if you were to send a Burrowing Bane and the other Life Wizard had 5 pips, they would just Earthwalker, do a little bit of damage, and it would clear up to 2 of those damage overtimes, which would get rid of the whole Burrowing Bane, and then put a little dot on you. So getting countered, it's a thing in this game, and I personally detest that aspect of it because it makes the game a lot less fun, but it's here to stay, and that's just sort of how it goes. So that is that. But yeah, just make sure you know what you are strong against and weak against, and keep in mind, like, spell weaving is a thing now, so it's like if you see somebody getting fire pips, you might not want to go for a bunch of shields. If you see somebody getting storm pips, you might not want to go for one of these, or even one of these, because storm can counter both this and this quite handily. So just something to keep in mind as you go. So yeah, that, and that Rambo Wheel, that's sort of, it's like the hanging effects is sort of the main thing. So it's like, for fire, that's damage overtimes, and then life also has damage overtimes sort of as a secondary. Yeah, each school has 3 identities, technically, like 3 hanging effects for their identity. So fire is damage overtimes for primary, traps for secondary, and heal overtimes for tertiary. Ice has shields for primary, weaknesses for secondary and traps for tertiary, and then Storm has blades for primary, heal overtimes for secondary, and then weaknesses for tertiary. It's going to be a lot at once, I'm sorry. Myth has traps for primary, then it's, what is it, shields for secondary? I think it's shields for secondary, and then its tertiary is going to be, Myth's tertiary is dots, damage overtimes, and then Life's primary is heal overtimes, so cards like TapWater, that's part of Life's main identity, and then the secondary identity for Life is... Secondary identity for Life is like what? Dots? Yeah, damage over times. So, heal over time, then damage over time, and then the tertiary identity is Blades. So, there you go. That's what it is for Life. And then for Death, it's going to be weaknesses is the primary, and then Blades is the secondary, shields is the tertiary, and then Balance does not have a set hanging effect for its identity. It just sort of manipulates and echoes every other hanging effect. So that's sort of why Balance is in a good spot right now. But yeah, that's sort of what every school sort of does, and it's like you see the Rambo Wheel, and that's just sort of what counters what. So it's like Storm counters Life because Storm can counter heal over times, which is Life's primary, and damage over times, which is Life's secondary. So there's that. Blades Storm can't counter. It's neutral, but Life doesn't really have an extensive blade library. So card libraries, it's a whole thing. I've probably talked that to death on other videos too. So there you have that. This is half an hour long. I'm going to be uploading this all night. But anyway, last up, just a brief sort of thing that every school sort of does and goes for. So it's like I was saying, each school has their own, hanging effects that correspond with their identity these days. So, but, I mean, there are sometimes, it's like they have their hanging effects, but sometimes, like, you'll just go for, like, a punch-out type deal. So, Fire will go for, either like a burst damage strategy with things like, Brimstone Revenant, Elephant, cards like Ammut, and like its fusions and whatnot, and it will sometimes use traps, and that, or they will spam damage overtimes at their opponent to just sort of overwhelm them. But again, if you're a Fire doing that, you've got to be careful of Storm Pips or Life Pips, because Spinosaur and TapWater can be like these are both damage overtime clears, and then so is Earthwalker. So yeah, that's what those symbols mean. And there is this this neat little function here where you can right-click a spell when it's in your deck, and it can actually show you just sort of what's going on here. So there is that. And then what else is there? Yeah, it's like if a Fire is able to keep some damage overtimes on and they use an Ifrit, then that's like basically a win for Fire, which is why Fire, in my opinion, is the second best school right now. It's like if they get that Ifrit off, they are winning the match. That's just how it goes. So there's that. Ice's main thing is shields, but it's way too easy to counter them right now, so there's a lot of aura ping-pong going on with Ice. So Ice will be using, a lot of stabilizes and braces, and they will be countering the opponent's aura with things like, Attenuate and also Thieving Dragon, which is like an aura clear for like a 70% shield. So Thieving Dragon, good against auras, and then Ice just in general is good with auras. Auras, I think, are Ice's like strongest identity out of the four that they technically have. So it's like I know I was talking about like every school has three, but there's a couple that sort of interact with auras, which that's like what, Ice, Life, Death, and Storm. They all do. But yeah, Ice will just aura a lot. So keep that in mind. If you are in Ice, you definitely want to be using Stabilize and Brace as best as you can, just sort of out-tanking and that sort of thing. And Ice has a new spell called Shu, which counters negative auras. It's a one-of-a-kind type deal. Ice is the only school that can do that right now. So do not use a negative aura against an Ice. That means like Attenuate and Starfall and all that. So just something to keep in mind. That's something that Ice can do. Storm is like a glass cannon. And I should mention Ice is the worst school right now, number 7 out of 7, just because it's way too easy to counter them otherwise. But yeah, Storm, 4th on the ranking, in my opinion. They are the glass cannon. They will just try and blitz you down as quick as you can. Spells like Catch of the Day are very strong. It's like it's a big hit that gives 2 45% blades, so you've really got to respond to that as best as you can. Keep your counters going. And then that's just sort of the thing with Storm. They can also heal, although they are fragile. They can still heal with cards like Berry Surprise being cheap and strong and potent heal counter. Not even counters, but just heals in general. And then Myth is very focused on mid-pip hits and burst damage. It's like they have effects that they set up, like traps and whatnot, but a Myth is more focused on countering damage mitigation. So if you weakness a Myth, they will use a Stone Colossus. If you shield against a Myth, they will use Drop Bear Fury, and that the B path of both, by the way. And they will use Drop Bear Fury, and they will just get around the shields and weaknesses like that. Cards like Stabilize are good against Myth, but they can also carry Attenuates just like everybody else. And so yeah, Myth, it is the number 6 school in my opinion. It's not like the greatest. It's definitely pretty far down there on the tier list, but it absolutely can put up a fight. So yeah, it's just you've got to really blitz people to death if you're a Myth. That's just sort of how that goes. So Life, or I should mention, Myth also has their card Fantastic Djinn, which I don't have here, but you get the idea. That is a shield gambit, so where Verdurous Djinn is a damage overtime gambit, Fantastic Djinn is a shield gambit, which does a lot more damage for 11 pips if the Myth Wizard has 4 shields on them, so just something to keep in mind there. So be on top of your shield counters against Myth. That's kind of how that goes. And they can also... It's like Myth is kind of sort of like a blitz them down type deal, like type school, with like Ninja Pig, Stone Colossus, and Drop Bear making up a lot of their deck. But they can also use Toth, the new spell, to either set up like a triple trap, and I do actually have a Toth spell element, so I can show you, but they can use triple trap, or actually I can't show you because I'm not a Myth, but they can use a triple trap fusion, or they can use a triple dot fusion. And triple trap creates a lot of pressure, but the triple dot will set up their Trickster Oni gambit, which is Verdurous Djinn, but like for Myth and stronger. So you get the idea. So keep that in mind. Just be wary of that if you're going against a Myth. But a lot of them will just go for the standard blitz them down type strat. Life is the healing school. It has the best survivability out of any. I've been using it as an example this whole time. It's the best school in my opinion, because Life, for some reason, it's got very good survivability, the best in the game, but it can also, it's got like offensive tools for some reason. Like Goat Monk is very strong. It gives you so much value. Burrowing Bane, very strong. If you don't counter this, you're taking like 2,500 damage if it's like butt with like a bubble or something like that. Hungry Caterpillar does a lot in its own right, you know? It's like, I mentioned Goat Monk, Hungry Caterpillar, and then they have a very strong trap counter in Centaur, which can be very, very good. So, yeah, I mean, Life is in a very good position right now. It's the best school in my opinion. So, you have that. And then I also, yeah, I should mention like a little bit more about Dark Surge. I should have said this in the cycling thing, but this is a very important card. You want to mostly be using these to go for combos like I was talking about earlier with like the Burrowing Bane twice into a Djinn type deal, if you can go for that, and just making sure you have the pips to counter, because that matters a lot. Occasionally you'll get like a shadow hit off, but most of your shads are going to go to this spell, so just something to quickly toss in there before I forget. But yeah, Life is the best school for all of the reasons that I mentioned. It's very good at surviving, and it can play offensively just as well. So, Life is very strong. Best school right now, in my opinion. Death's focus is weakness and mitigation, or like weaknesses, rather. So, they have some strong cards, and they are good at countering auras. I think they are the 5th best school overall. So, they've got some moves. They absolutely have some moves. But yeah, they're just not like the strongest. They do have the best stats though, in my opinion. Death has like 78 resist. I mean, if you look back at the screenshot of the stat caps, like Death has very high damage cap and a very high resist cap. Like they made Death the damage and resist school. I don't know why they did that, but they did, and Death is like really benefiting from that. So you have that. So the last school to talk about is Balance, and Balance is also pretty tanky, and they can use the opponent's buffs against them with things like, you know, Chameleon Clash, Scarab to steal their blades, that type of deal, and like they're very versatile and strong at the moment, and I would say that they are the third best school at present. So, wow, that was a long-winded video. We have pushed 40 minutes. Yeah, maybe I could have done a bit better at summarizing, but it is what it is. So, with that all being said, thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more. And I will see y'all later.